Hello and welcome. This is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and in today's training we have an amazing filtering option where we have a single click filter option. We have the ability to filter out and filter in additional features simply by selecting on them, and then we have the ability to remove those filters with a single click. It's going to be an amazing one-of-a-kind training, so let's get started. All right, thanks so much for joining me today. I've got an original and unique training for you. It's going to be one-of-a-kind training, and I don't think you've seen it. I have not seen this type of filtering before. So outside of some types of pivot tables where we do have a single click, we do have the ability to add in filters simply by adding them in. If we want to see multiples, we can do that, and then if we want to clear them out, we can just simply close them. We have dynamic shapes here, so the shapes are dynamic based on the text. We have dynamic filters based on whatever the user enters here, so we can add and remove those filters just with a click. So it's going to be a really great training. Of course, before, if you have not seen it yet, I do want you to take a look at the single click dashboard masterclass we have. This is a 15-hour masterclass that gives you the ability to create dashboards based on tons of features, and that includes a custom report, a sales by month. It's a single click dashboard. Users have the ability to learn how to show or hide columns simply based on a single click. Users also have the ability to save these reports as a custom report, which gives you an amazing ability to save your own reports based on certain features. And you also have the ability to add and remove custom reports. It's an amazing training. So if you haven't seen that yet, please get a look at that. I think it's something that you will absolutely love. All right, let's continue on with our training today, which is the single click filters. It's an amazing filtering system that I've devised today to show for you, and it mimics some of the websites and some of the larger applications that have filter abilities based on a single click. So it's something that has a really unique visual representation and something that an end user might learn how and to use real quickly, whereas the pivot tables use a little bit of user, I would say, experience using pivot tables, how to manipulate those, whereas something like this, if you give this to an end user, they'll be able to use it very, very quickly and see just how they can add to it and remove it. So this has a really, really end user ability. And if you'll see these shapes on the left side, they're all dynamic, and the width of those shapes is dynamic based on the text entered. And of course, their positioning as well. So if we were to remove red, we know, here, in fact, we don't even have any. Let's pull up some red here. Hoodies are in red. We have hoodies in red. Now let's say we want to remove the red color. We just have to click there and it's going to remove all of the red. Same thing, if we only want to show green and white, we can remove the blue. So this gives us a really amazing, and this table, of course, is a very similar table to what we did last week. And if you missed last week, we had the amazing ability to have a drop down picture, which was really amazing. So we're using basically the same data structure, but in this instance, we are actually using a different filter. So I'm showing you multiple ways to work with the same table. In fact, ways in which are very user-friendly and very easily capable of programming it once we get through this training. So let's get started. I'm going to show you exactly how I did this. Now, in this particular filtering, we are using, I'm not using this as an original data. This is not our original data. You'll notice that none of these rows are hidden. Now, sometimes I will filter in place and hide these rows, but for this instance, I really didn't want to. I wanted to keep everything. I wanted to keep our table structure, our row structure, everything the same. I didn't want to filter in place, and what that means is our data needs to be located somewhere else, and I really like to have data located somewhere else. I really like to separate what the user sees, the data that the user sees, and the actual data. So that, because when you do that, when you think like that, we can create much larger applications. We can also share applications. In fact, I think next week or the week after, I'm going to go back into sharing workbooks. Now, we covered this twice before, but I'm going to go through this in a very simple table. How do you share your macro-enabled workbook simultaneously with users around the world? Now, we covered that, I think, in Employee Manager 20 or 19, but it was part of a larger application, maybe complex. So we're going to get to that in a couple weeks. If that's something you would like to see, if you want me to revisit that, go ahead and put your comments down below and let me know, and I'll add that in. Of course, I create these videos for you, so if you want help or need something, please leave a comment. And of course, please share this and like this. And of course, if you have not yet, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button as well as the notifications button down below, so that you can get notified each and every week when I do create these videos for you. All right, so back onto this. So what I'm saying is the original data of this application is not located here in this main table. It is located right here in the columns AF through AM. This is our original data. So I've marked this as original data, and here's, you can have your original data on another sheet, that's fine, as long as it's off. I personally, for this type of filtering, I like my data off. You can try this filtering in place, you can, but I'm just saying for training purposes, I want to keep things really separate, really clear, and really easy to understand. So I've separated it out. This is our original data. So what we're going to basically doing is taking this data and then filtering it out. As with so many of my trainings, we're going to use advanced filtering, and we're going to base it on certain criteria. Now, the criteria is going to be based on this table right here. So we can have multiple criteria. So in fact, this is used for OR. We can have OR type. So for example, when we have multiple types, let's say we want men's and we want women's and we want kids, right? So our filter, we want to filter for kids, men's, and women's. So it could be any of those. So men's, women's, or kids. That is going to be down here. Our advanced filter, our criteria is going to be located below. So it's going to be men's or women's or kids. If we wanted something like and if a filter, we would include it here on the left side. You know, sometimes we do dates, like the date must be less than this date or greater than this date. We would put less in here. So when we have and, we use horizontally. When we use or, we use vertically. So or men's or women's or kids for types. So as we add them here, they get done. So if we add another style, right now we have sweatshirts. So if we add another polo, another style shirt, we're going to go ahead and add that to this list. And if we remove polo just by clicking here, it's going to remove this item from the criteria. See, it's gone from here. So that's basically what we're going to do through the VBA code. So we've got several factors. The first, what we're going to do is we're going to go through the advanced filtering. And so basically what we're going to be doing through the code is we're going to take this data and we're going to filter it. The first filter is going to be our type. So I'm going to take this original data here and use the criteria of type. We're going to look for files that are men's, women's, or kids. And then we're going to put the result right here into type result. So in this result, we have, again, men's, women's, and kids only. Okay, so babies are out. So you see it's almost all the list, but not. So then I'm going to take this type results and I'm going to run it through another filter. I'm going to run it through a style. From there, I want only sweatshirts. So we're going to take this type results and we're going to run it through another filter, the second filter. Actually, we're going to run it through, and in fact, that is going to be sweatshirts. So that means of these results, only the ones with sweatshirts are going to show up here. In fact, let's double click on this. Only sweatshirts are going to show up here. The next, we're going to run another filter, but there is no filter on color, but let's add one, right? So here in this color, we have blue, red, white, green. Okay, so we have a few blues here. Let's filter only blues. And all we need to do here is just take the color and add in blue. So we want blue, only blue. So here, now we have only blues. So now I've taken the style results, I filtered out, and I only want blue. I only want blue to show up. So now I only have blue. So our results are then, these are our final results. And our final results are taken from this table and they're brought back right into this table with just a single line of code. So that's the process. The first is the type filter, the second is the style, and the third is color. Now, of course, if there are no styles or if there are no colors, for example, let's pull out the colors, let's pull out the styles. And so here, in fact, we only have men's and women's. There are no styles, there are no colors. So once we get through our original filter, which is here, it just continues to repeat. So we have the same table. Let's reduce that. So we have the same table, the same results, both in styles and in color because there are no filters. So these are the identical tables. Since there are no additional criteria, our table just gets duplicated and then it gets brought back into the main. So that's what we're going to do. In fact, if we only want to show women's, we can just click men's and our list is going to rebuild. The second part of this week's training, we're going to show you how we create these amazing dynamic filter shapes, dynamic in position, dynamic in size, dynamic in function. And what that means is this shape can have multiple functions based on the text that's inside it. So there's a lot of dynamic things going on, but it's a great training, something you will only see here on Excel for Freelancers. So make sure you support us. I would always appreciate that. In fact, I've got an amazing resource guide coming out with 1,000 resources within about a week. So it's going to be an amazing little application there with 1,000 Excel resources. So keep an eye out for that in our group, Excel for Freelancers group, or on our page, or of course on our website, Excel for Freelancers. Make sure you subscribe automatically by downloading any of the workbooks. This, as well as every other workbook, is available in the description. The links down below, whether with Facebook or email. So make sure you get your copy of this workbook, and it's free, of course. All you need to do is just add in your name and email, and we'll get that sent right over to you. All right, so let's go ahead and start out with the first part, the part that I just showed you, which is the filtering, the advanced filtering. Let's see how that was done. We're going to go into the developers and walk you through every step in VBA. Into the developers tab is right here. If you don't have that developers tab open, of course you can find it into the options and the customize ribbon, and just make sure your developers are selected here. Alt F11 will also get you there. That is the shortcut there. So we'll go ahead and click that. Alt 11, and we have two different modules here in our VBA. We have filtering macros and we have filters remove. So we're gonna do a few of those. We're gonna start off with the filtering macros, and we're gonna start off with filter table. This is the one macro that runs every single time we make a change. Now, how is that change translated? Well, let's take a look under the on sheet macros. We have just one sheet and we only have a few different lines of code for this sheet, and all of those code are based on worksheet change. So we have nothing going on when we make a selection. There's nothing going on. There's only macros that are run based on the actual change, based on actual changes. The first line of code, if the target count large is greater than one that exits sub. This keeps bugs from happening when users select large amounts of cells or large number of cells, or in fact all of the cells on the workbook. Sometimes you may get an error. If you do get an error when you click on all those cells, it's because you have the selection or click or a change to a large number of cells. So that line of code helps avoid the bug. You'll see that often. All right, first we're going to dimension the last row is long. I need to know the last row of data, so that's very, very important. So we may use that in the future. I don't think we need that. Here we do. The last row is going to be determined here, and I'll show you how that works here. We need that, so we'll go ahead and on error resume next, just in case there's an error on the selection of this. If the user makes a change anywhere from F5 to H5 and the target value is empty, YF5 to H5. Well, there's the two filter criteria here, F5 through H5, these three fields. If the user makes a change and that change is not blank, then something should happen. What should happen? Well, if they add mens to this, we want something to happen. Now we're going to filter. So we have to take action. We want the Excel to do something when we make that change. So let's focus on that change. So when we run through the code, we want something to happen when these two conditions are met. The first condition, the user makes a change in any one of these three cells. And of course, we want to make sure that the actual change that they're making is not blank. So once those two actions are true, we're going to determine the last row. What is the last row? The target column plus 21. Why is this? Well, what I want to do is on whatever they type in here, whatever, let's say we have men's and women's, whatever they select here, I want it to appear right here. In fact, I want it to appear here in this type, but I want it to appear at the first available cell. I don't want to replace this, and I don't want to replace this. I want to put it in the first available. Now, what column is this? This is column. This is column 27. Now, what column are they making the actual change on? This is column equals column. It's going to provide an error. All right, I think this is column. I can't use that. Equals column. I can use this because data is just going to get replaced. This is column 6. So if this is column 6, and this is column 27. There's a 21 column difference, right? So what I'm saying is if they make a change to this, what was this, men's, whatever. So if they make a change to this, then I want to take whatever value and I want to put it in the column that is 21 columns greater, which is this column. If they made a change to the style, it's going to be this, and if they made a change, so this is the column that I want to place it, but now we need to figure out what row. What row are we going to place that? I want to place it right here. Well, it's the first available row. The first available row is where I want to place it. So if they select kids, I want to place that kids right here. Now I got to find, now I know what column because it's exactly 21 columns greater than the current column. But what row? Well, it's the first available row, the first available cell in the row. So that is what we need to determine in VBA, and we can do that with this line of code. We're going to use the ultimate last, where you use cells. Why are we using cells and not range? We're using cells because both the column and the row are both dynamic based on numbers. When we have a fixed column like H or column D or column L, then we can use range. But in this case, our column is numerical. Our column is numerical, so we're using cells. So that's the difference why we sometimes use cells and sometimes we use range. Range, we know the column is F, H, or whatever. But when we don't know, when that column is dynamic, it's based on a number, then we want to use cells. Okay, so that's very, very important. So last row, we're just going to use a large last row. We can use 99 or 10 or whatever. It's not so important as long as it's well below the threshold. And then the target column, remember I explained, is the target column, the column that they've actually made a change to, plus 21. And the last row is we're going to use end XLUP. This is going to get us our last row of the value. This is our last row of the value. We still need to add one. Don't remember, we still need to add one to this. We could add one. So our last row, this is the one with value. Now what we want to do is we want to place that value in one more row above. So again, the next line, cells, the last row, this is the one with value. But if we plus one, that means this first available row. The first available row, that's the row we're going to place whatever they've changed. And what about the column? The column is simply the target column plus 21, because we know there's 21 columns different. So we're going to place the value that they changed, we're going to place it right there. And so this way, this line of code works regardless if they're selecting F5, G5, or H5. Regardless, this line of code will work. It's a dynamic code based on regardless, because we've used the code, because we've used that. So that means that if they click style, that line of code is also going, and if they pick color, that line of code is also going to work. So it's going to place these values 21 columns over the first available row, so we can get that. So that provides us our criteria. So now you know how our criteria is placed in the proper areas. So we've got that. So the next line of code, now we're going to clear the target. I no longer need a value here. I no longer need a value here because our value is going to be here in the filters on the left. So we really don't need to see it here. We want this blank and ready for the user to enter a brand new value. Right? So if they want to also add red to this, they can add red. So we clear this cell out so that the user is ready to add a brand new one. So now it's cleared out. So now we have the ability to add blue, and we want to remove red, we just click it. This is extremely, at least in my idea, it's very, very intuitive, because this is the way that many websites work. Like if you're on eBay or sometimes Airbnb or certain traveling, they really use this type of a filtering, and I think users are very familiar with it, and it's very intuitive. So I wanted to try it in Excel. So I have never seen it in this manner in Excel with using shapes, so I wanted to try it and see if I could do it. So why not? So it's something that I just learned, and I wanted to, of course, as soon as I learn it, I share it with you. So this is not something that I've used for years. It's something that I wanted to, and I said, let's try and figure it out. And then as soon as I figure it out, I want to share it with you. So the idea is to try new things, and it doesn't mean I've known how to do this for years. I've known how to do this for days, but don't be afraid to try new things. Don't be afraid to take chances. I do it. I have to come up with it. Maybe there's probably still some issues with this. There's probably still some bugs. I'm sure there's some things, but don't be afraid to try new things. Don't be afraid to put your work out there. I want to see you pushing the limits every single day. And that means making mistakes. I'm sure I've made mistakes, but I I'm still going to try it. I'm still going to try it. And I want to see the same from you. And I want you to push the limits and then present those, what you found, in our group. Our group is an amazing Excel for Freelancers group. If you haven't joined, I'll include the links down below. But you can present your problems, your issues, the work that you've done. We love to see it. Motivates everybody. So I really love the work that I'm seeing from our members. So it's really amazing. All right, so back onto this before I get off subject. So this gives us the ability to place them in the criteria, and we know we've cleared out the cell, ready for another one. And now let's move on to the next line of code, which is actually a macro we're going to run. We're going to build the filters. I'm going to cover this macro in just a moment. Okay, building the filters is basically creating these shapes here. But we're going to skip that for now. We're going to go right to the filter, the table. This is the macro that we're going to show you, the filtering, because this is the easiest part. We've covered that using advanced filters, so we can move through it relatively quickly because it's just basic advanced filters. And with something we've covered in many of the trainings. So filter tables, that will be in this module called filter macros module. And here is our macro called filter table. And we need to determine the last rows. I need to know, so we can run the filters properly, I need to know the last type row, the last style row, so we need to determine all this information. So the first thing is the last data row. That's our original data, and our original data is located in AF. Again, let's pull that up. Our original data, which is right here, and we have AF through AM, all this. So this is our original data. So what I need to do is, before I run the advanced filter, I need to determine the last row. In this case, the last row is 47, but we've created that dynamically using end XLUp, so we can get that. We need to do that before we run our initial advanced filter. So I also need to know the last row of each of our criteria, whether it's type, style, or color, because we're going to use that criteria and we need to get that range. So in this case, here's our criteria. For type, our last row is in column AA and the last row is 7. For style, our criteria, our last row is 5, and for color, our last row is 5 as well. So we need to get those last rows because I'm going to have to pull these criteria, these ranges, starting with the heading in row 4 all the way down to 7. So we need to pull these for our advanced filters using these specific ranges. So we definitely need to determine the last row of these. So that's why we've dimensioned those as long in each one. And of course, we've pulled those values into these variables. So we've got the last data row, type, style, and color. These are our criteria. This is our data. Now that we have that, we are ready to clear. We want to clear out our existing table along with any of the results. The only table we want to have is our original data. And what does that mean? That means I want to take this data starting in D6 all the way to DK and down. I don't want to delete that. I want to remove that. I want to bring our new value in there, so I want to clear all that out. I also want to take all of our results starting here in AP5 all the way over to BO and down, and I want to clear that out too. So I want to make sure that all of that data is actually cleared out so that we can get ready to run our filters based on our criteria and get those results into these tables. These are for results. So we're going to take our original data and rerun that filter. So we need to clear that out, and we can do that with VBA in just this line of code, D6 through K99, and then of course AP through BO. It's just what I did manually. Now we're doing it with VBA. The first is we're going to run our type filter, our advanced filter. So we're going to run 3 different filters just as I walked you through. We're going to run a type advanced filter, we're going to run a style filter, and then we're going to run, this should be a color. Then we're going to run a color filter. So we're going to run all 3 of those filters. The first of which, we're going to take our original data, AF4 through AM in the last data row. Remember, we've defined that up here. We're going to run that advanced filter, and we're going to base it, we're going to copy that data to a new area. And we're going to base it on criteria AA. This is our type criteria, AA forward, AA in the last type row. Remember, our criteria is right here. AA4 must include the headers and go all the way down to the last row. In this case, it's 7. So we're going to take that as our criteria range, and we're going to run that filter. And then, of course, we're going to put the results of that filter right here into AP4 through AW4. So the rest of our advanced filter code will do just that. Copy to range. What range are we copying to? AP4 through AW4. And of course, we want unique. I just put this as false. You're going to probably want it true. The reason is I have it false is because I think a lot of my data, we have the same types of data. I copied and pasted data. So I just put unique as true, as false, so that I can get more data, just to show you. But you may want it unique as true. But either way, we're going to get you that data. All right, so that's continuing on. So that's how we do. And then what I want to do is I want to determine the last row of this filter so that I can pull that. And then of course, if the last row is less than 5, then go to no data. If it's less than 5, I want to skip all of this and go right to here to no data. Why is that? Well, if for some reason our results are going to go here, our results are going to be, we're going to get the last row of AP. We're going to use AP to get the last row of our results. In this case, if the last row, in this case it's 4 because there is no data. So if the last row is less than 5, there already are no results, so we can skip that. So for example, if we add another filter in men's, of course we have men's twice, now we get some data, and so we can remove men's. So we see here that when we clear the filter and then add another one in, we'll see that we do have data here. We do have data, and our last row in this case is 18. So we need to get that data so that we can run another advanced filter for style. So that we'll continue on with that. So we need that last row, and we're going to use that last filter row in our next advanced filter. But now we're going to run our styles filter. So we're going to start out with AP 4 through AW. Those are the results. Those are the results here. AP 4 through AW. In the last row, we're going to take this data, run it through another. In this case, there is no style, but if we add a style, we'll see. Let's say we only want polo shirts here. Now we have data. Now we've run it through. Now we have a style. Now we have a filtered amount. So now you see how the filter reduces. So we're going to take this data, we're going to run it a brand new advanced filter here and get the results and put them right here under the style results. So the results, of course, of this are going to go in AY through BF. So we're going to take that advanced filter, going to run the criteria AB. Remember before it was AA, now it's AB. And the results are going to go right here, just where I showed you, into AY4 through BF4. That's where the results are going to go. So again, then we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to get the last filter row of these results, and this time we're going to pull it from AY, the column AY. We're going to get the last row. Again, checking again. Is the last filter row less than 5? If it is, go to no data. If it's not, continue with the colors. And again, the same thing. We're going to run again another advanced filter using the results in our style. Okay, our results go into AY, and then we take again AY, and we run another filter based on color, based on the criteria here, into AC4 through AC in the last row. Again, our colors, again, our last criteria is AC. So if we add 2 colors to this, we'll see that the colors get added. So let's go ahead and add blue and white colors to this, or let's add red, and let's add blue. So now we have 2 colors onto this. So now we can see that there's 2 colors for women's polo shirts. So now we have women's polo shirts in both blue and red right here. So we've added that, and we can see that those results, those last results are located right here, So all we need to do now is take this data and bring it back into our original table. Of course, our original table data has already been cleared, so we're ready to bring it back. So that is our last row. So we've gotten our last, and we take our last filter row, and again, one more. If their last filter row is less than 5, skip that. Skip this line of code, because this line of code is the code that copies our last data and brings it back into our visible table. So taking the last D6 through K and the last filter row +1. Why are we +1? Because our results in our visible table start in row 6, but our filter data starts in row 5. So we need to add 1 row to compensate for that. So we're going to take our data, our last filtered results, take this information and place it right into our main table, which is D6 through K. D6, going to take that, take this information, BH5 through BO in the last row, bring that and with a value to value, starting in row 6, D6, all the way to K in the last. So that's how we bring the data in, and that's pretty much it. So that, now we've got that, and the last thing we want to make sure that our clear filter button is visible. I don't think I've made it invisible in this case. I think it's always visible, but just so our clear filter button, we've got that. All right. Now we've got that. So now we've got a filter here, and we know how we get the rows. Let's clear the filter. When we clear the filter, basically what we want to do in this case is I want to take all the criteria, I want to clear it out, and I want to run the filters again. So that's pretty much all we do. I just want to clear out all the criteria and then run that filter macro again. Of course, with no criteria, it's going to take our original data, it's going to place it right here, and then take that data and place it right here. It's going to go through. I guess, you know, we could also take the original data and bring it right back in here. We could do that too. So it's just the same. Either way, I just ran the same macro. I didn't, you know, I was maybe a bit lazy, but I just ran the macro. So let me show you exactly how we did that. On clear filter, we're going to hide the shapes. I'll go over this in a minute because I will also want to hide the shapes. Right? I want to hide if there's any shapes here where there's no more filters. So if we have some shapes here, we have some filtering information here, and we want to add specific colors here, blue, green, white. So if we want to add them, I want to clear, when we clear the filters, I want to clear these buttons too. So that's what that one includes. I'll go over that in a minute because all we're doing is running a loop, but I wanted to go through the other parts of the filter first so that we can get that out of the way. So all we're doing is clearing the criteria and rerunning the filter macro. So that's it. Now I've created buttons. Remind me, hopefully I remember to go through this part again. All we're going to do is loop through all the buttons. All the buttons are named based on, I guess we better go through it now. All these buttons are basically named on a number, so it's very, very easy to hide them. Let's show those buttons now. And so we've got some buttons. We've got two parts to each button. Each button includes a shape here, and it's called filter shape 1. And they have a close button, and that close button is named close button 1. So there's a total of 12 of them. Total of 12. Why 12? Because I really have 12. I have 4 possible filters here. I have 4 possible filters here, and I have 4 possible filters here. So 3 times 4 is 12, so I just made it 12. So if we were to go in and view all the shapes, we'll see that we have everything here. Close buttons 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way through 12, and we have filter shapes 1 through 12. So it's relatively simple. So what I want to do is I want to run a loop, and I want to hide everything. I want to hide all the close buttons, and I want to hide all of the little close icons here. So just by clearing the filter, it's going to clear everything up. So we can do that with this line of code here, running the shape number 1 through 12, using the shapes filter. Now remember, they all end in the shape number. The shape number is dynamic. So we can do filter shape 1, filter shape 2, and again, close button 1, 2, and all the way through 12, and then making each one visible equals MSO false, so basically in hiding those individual shapes. So we can hide all 24 of those shapes, 12 of the filter shape, 12 of the close buttons, with just this little loop here. All right, now we covered it. All right, so those are the shapes that we're going to use to filter it. Right, and there's another small macro, which is get unique list. I only ran this once, and basically what that did is gets the unique list. So it takes this data here, our original data, let's close this out, and gets some unique lists. Now these are my unique lists right here, here, and here. So all that does is get that. So you can run that macro. It's just an advanced filter, and it helps. And these unique lists are also based on data. So when you click here, you'll see that this is a named range called type. When you click here, you'll see it's a style and then likewise color. And I've used those data here into here to color. So when you click here and we click data and then we click data validation, it's simply the type. And then I've done the same thing, create a list for style and color. It's just how we know we get that. So that's how we get that. All right, so now moving forward, here's the idea. When I click a specific filter, I want to filter by just that name, men's. But I want to be able to clear that out very easily. Now I could clear filter out, but what if I say I want to show men's and women's, and I decide, you know what, I just want to show men's or women's. So I want to close out men's. So what I want to do is I want to remove the men's shape, and I want to leave women's, and I also want to run the filter again. So we need to do that. We need to run that. So let's go ahead and see how we did that. Now you saw all the shapes that I have. So the shapes are basically close button and filter shape. So I've got those 24 shapes, and let's show how we display them and how we position them. So let's go ahead and show you that right now. Into the VBA we go, and we have additional macros up here called build filters. Build the filters. Now this macro is going to run our shapes, and it's going to build a filter. So every single time we have a new filter, it's going to hide them all and rebuild it. So that's how we do it. So we're going to so every time we add a new filter, every single time, it's going to rebuild that filter. It's going to remove them all and rebuild the filter. And those filters are going to be based on this criteria right here. So what I want to do is I want to run through columns 27, 28, and 29. I want to run through those columns, and I want to run through all of the rows. Oh, I clicked women's twice. That's probably not helpful, but you get the point. So what I want to do is I want to run through the 3 columns, and then I want to run through all the criteria within each column. So we're going to start out at row 5 and go all the way to the last row. Start out, then move to the next column. Start in row 5 and go to the last row. Start in row 5 and go to the last. So we're going to do that for each of the columns. So those are 2 different loops. One to run through the columns, one to run through the rows. So let's go over that. But the first thing we want to do is clear any out, because if the user updates it, I want to update this whole list. I don't just want to add it. I want to update the whole list. And the same thing for when we close it. When we remove one, I want to also redo the list. I want to remove them all and replace them again. So this macro does all of that. Okay, so the first thing we want to know is I want to know the filter column and the filter row. We need to run a loop through the rows and through the columns in the criteria. So I just explained that to you. And then we want to determine the last filter row. I need to know this last filter row because we need to run through those. And we're going to dimension the shape number. This should be as long. And the filter shape number as long, we're going to be using these, and then the filter number. We'll use all of these. The first thing I want to do is when we rebuild all the filters, I want to hide them all. So here's that loop again, the same loop, the shape number 1 through 12. We're going to hide all of the shapes, and we're going to hide all the close buttons. So that hides everything. This part of the code hides everything. Then what I want to do is I want to put those new shapes in, and I want to base them off of whatever criteria we have. So again, we're going to start our loop, our first loop. First of all, we're going to set the first filter shape number to 1. Okay, we're going to run through them all, but I need to set the first one at 1 just so we can keep track of them. So the filter columns 27 through 29, we just went over that, but let me remind you, I want to go through each of these columns here, 27 through 29. I want to go through them all, and then I want to run through the rows. And so if we have multiple filters here, let's add more in here so that we can see how multiple ones will work all. All right, so now we've got women's and babies. Okay, so now we've got a lot of rows. So what I want to do is I want to run through all of these from the top to the bottom, from these top to the bottom, and these. I want to run that. So the 2 loops we're going through. So the first loop is here, 1 through 27. We want to determine the last filter row. I need to know the last filter row. In this case, for column 27, our first, the last is row 7. So we need to get that. I need to get that 7. So how do we do that? Well, we do it for 99 is the lowest possible row. It's never going to be that much, but just in case, set a high, low. And then the filter column, in this case, is 27. So using end XL up row is going to get us our last row with a value. So we need to know that. That's important. Our last filter row. Now, if it's less than 5, then go to the next column. That means there is no data, right? If it's less than 5, that means there would be nothing here. So then move to the next column and move to the next column. So we would want to skip that if there's no data. So moving on. For the filter row, starting at 5 to the last filter row. Starting at 5, right? Starting at 5 here and going to the last row. In this case, it's 7. This is our second loop from 5 to 7. That is our loop. We're going to run through that second loop. And what do we want to do with that loop? Let's continue. Okay, starting with the first shape. Remember, we set our filter shape at 1. So we're going to start with our first shape. Filter shape 1. Again, let's go look at that filter shape just so we know what we're focusing on. Starting with this shape right here. Filter shape 1. See, here's the name here. We're going to do something with this shape. So that's the first one. Remember, we've already cleared, we've already hidden all these out. And we're going to start with just this shape. And what do we want to do with it? We want to do a few different things. I want to name it, I want to place it, and I want to position it. First of all, I want to make it visible. So I want to make it visible. Next thing, I want to add a text frame. I want to add text here. I want that text to be women's, right? I want the text to be whatever is here. I included women's twice, probably not. Let's remove one so it's not confusing. Let's add men's, okay? men's. Okay, so now we have, so the first one I want women's, and the next one I want babies. So it's going to take this text, and I want to put this text, which is in, of course, column 27, row 5, and I want to place that text right inside this shape here. So we can do that with this line of code. The text frame 2 text range is equal to sheet 1 cells filter row, the row that we're continuing on, and the filter column. Remember, we're running through this loop, and whatever the value is here. Why did I use sheet 1 here? Because we're with shapes, so I must define sheet 1 again because we're focused on with shapes. So I have to redefine sheet 1 here, okay? Because we're inside a double width here, and with here, so we need to define sheet 1. All right, moving on. So now we've defined the name. Now we want to auto size. This is a great little feature. What this is going to do is we're going to auto size the shape based on the text. Now, it's going to make it a little bit bigger. So it's going to auto size it based on the text, which is great. Except it's not perfect auto size. It's a little bit too high. When we just auto size it, let me just take a look. Let's see. What if we don't set the height? Comment this out. And what if we don't set the height? Watch what happens. Because we want to set the height. The auto size is too big. So when we add a new filter, it's going to reset them all. They're way too big, right? So I want to bring that size down, right? Normally, just with auto size, it's too big. So I've got to bring the height down. So we bring it down to 15. So when we take that comment out, so we want to reset the height. Auto size is great for the width, but it's not enough, right? Auto size, if I take out the width now let's say we take out the width equals width plus 10. It's not going to be big enough, not going to be long enough. So let's do that. Let's add in another filter. Okay, so now we have it, but you see there's not enough room for the X, right? So I need to add some width. I need to make it wider, each shape a little bit wider. So that's why we use that additional line of code right here. Width equals the width, whatever the width is, just add 10 to it. That's why we have a dynamic width. Well, I don't want them all the same width because their width is based on their text. Auto size does that for us, but I want to make it a bit bigger. So we're going to take whatever the width is and then add 10 to it. Now, when we reset that, let's close one of these out, it'll reset them. Now we have just enough information, so now we have the width is just right. In fact, we could probably make that a little bit smaller, but it's okay. You get the point. All right, so now you understand how to make the height, how to set the size, how to set the width. So we've got that covered now. What is next? Now I want to place it. The left is 10. That's just going to place it, give it a 10. Right? You'll want to, you want to move it over a little bit to the right, we can do that. We can change this to 15 and it's going to move it over a little bit. So you can see how that affects, just delete one and it's going to reset. So you see it moved a little bit to the right. So that's how we do that. So it's going to position that on the left side. So we've got that. We'll put this back to 10 so we have enough space. And the top, now what is the top? Here's the tricky part. Each one has a different top. Each one, right? The top, the height, right? This one has the top is dynamic. I want to place the top of babies. I want to place it dynamic based on the one above. I want to place it a little bit below, a little bit the one below, and a little bit low. So I used a little bit of a formula and just a little bit of some code. So this determines is the top, the start one is going to be 153. If I made this 123, the top one's going to be really high up, just so you can see the difference. So when I close it, when I close one, you're going to see them all. So now they reset. You see they're much, much higher now. So 153 is where I want to. So if you want to place all these, and of course the X's would have to be placed also at the top. So I decided 153 was the right place for me. But you can see how that change affects it. Now what are we going to add it to? All right, here's the tricky part. Filter shape number plus 1. What are we going to add to it? If the filter shape number is 1, if it's the first one, this is going to be 1 and this is going to be 1. So this is going to be 0, right? So if we take 0 and multiply it times 18, we're not going to add anything to the first one, right? The first one's going to be 0. We're not going to add. So that means our shape number 1, we're not going to add any. Let's reset that. Okay, perfect. So now we're not going to add anything to our first one. But our second one, we're going to add a little bit to that, right? If it's our second one, let's say it's filter shape number 2 minus 1, 1 times 18 1808. Why 1808? That's just whatever worked out based on the height. So if the height is 15, I want to add a little bit of space. So I've added a little bit of space to drop it down. So we have our starting point and a rate. So this way the height is dynamic. The placement, the top placement is dynamic based on the filter shape number. So we've taken this, we've added in. So that means that 18 plus 3 or 18 plus 4 based on the shape. So that way each shape gets placed properly a little bit below each other one. So that's a great way to place them at specific intervals so they're all spaced out accordingly based on the shape number. That's how we get them spaced out. So that way, every time it gets rebuilt, it gets spaced out properly. So we use that. I basically calculated this 1808. It just worked out that way. That is the specific additional height. So very good. And then I guess the placement is free floating. What this means is basically I don't want to move or size them with Excel, so free floating. What is free floating? Well, that's the same thing as placing them when we right click and we click the format shape and we click on the properties here, we see don't move or size with cells. Don't move or size with cells. That is free floating, the same in free floating. So that's the same type of property. All right, moving on. So now we know how to place the shape. Now we have to focus on the close button. So let's see how we do that. Now with the close button, we have to place that, right? We've only placed the top shape. We haven't moved the close button. So with shape's close button and the shape number, of course, we're taking the shape number here and we're counting and using that. First of all, I want to make that close button true. Remember, our close buttons are also named close button 1, close button 2, close button 3, exactly. Each one of those close buttons has a different name. So we can move on with the close button. So I also want to place this close button on the left and I want to base it on the filter shape. I want to place it, should be the filter shape and the filter number left. I want to place it based on the shape of the same number, based on the shape of the same number. So that means the left and the top are also going to be based on whatever shape. It's going to be based on this shape, not based on a specific cell, but based on wherever the shape is placed, we're going to place this close. So we're going to base it on, and then we're going to move it down and move it to the right just a little bit. So we're going to place it to the left based on the shape, and then I'm going to move it a little bit to the left. So the increment left is going to be on whatever the width is minus 14. So basic on the width, because you'll see each one, you know, sometimes it's always based on the shape width. So I'm going to take the shape width on a place. So you see each of these close buttons that's based on dynamically, the placement is based on the left dynamically, based on the width, minus 14. So it's going to move, you know, if we didn't minus 14, it'll be farther. So we had to place that. So minus 14 is going to place it right there. And then of the top, what I want to do is I also want to place the top using that same formula, but this time a little bit lower, This is 153 and 155, right? Slightly lower. I don't want it right matching the top of that button. Let's zoom in and take a look at that. Let's zoom in. Okay, so you see, right, it's a little bit lower. If it was exactly at the top, it'd be right here, right? If it was, but I don't want it there. I want it right in the middle. So I want it right in the middle. So I put it about 2 pixels down, which puts it right properly in the middle of each one. So this gives you an idea, a look of how that can look. So it's not right at the top. So the height, the top portion is a little bit less. So if this top portion starts at 153, this one starts at 155, 2 pixels different, or roughly 1 pixel and 1/4 difference. So it's a little bit farther down. So that is how we place the close button exactly in the place we want based on the shape number, Okay, and the next thing we do is we must add one more. As we're continuing through these shapes, we need to increase our shape number 1. So increase our shape number equals 1 plus whatever the current number is. So that increases, that increments by 1 our shape number, and then we run through the loop. So we keep running through all of these. So for example, let's zoom back to normal. So for example, in this particular case, we have a total of 6 different shapes, right? So it's going to run 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's going to run through all those shape numbers and create 6 different shapes. So we have 6 different shapes, shape 1, 2, 3. So it's going to add all those shapes to our, and if we remove one, it's going to add 5. Why? Because we're going to run 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're going to loop through that, increasing incrementally the shape number and adding shapes. So that's how we position it. All right, so that's how we did it. Let's continue on. I think we're just about done. That closes our loop. Great. Okay, so we've got that covered. Now we know how we place our filters, but how do we click it and then remove it? Well, the first thing I did is create 12 different macros. There might be a faster way, but I just did it. So what I did is in the filter, I created 12 different macros here. They're very simple. All we're doing is we're setting a fixed remove filter number, and then I assign that macro to each of the 12 close buttons. So if we take a look at our close button, we right click any one and we click assign macro, we will see that this one has been assigned remove filter 3. Remove filter, that's the macro, and of course I have 12 of those remove filter buttons and created 12 small little macros. And so here, perhaps we can do this dynamically. So let me know if you find a quicker way to do that. I would love to do this with maybe a dynamic number, but I wanted to, each one has a different number, so we've assigned a different. So all we need to do is assign this number, and the reason is we can use a static number here because we've assigned this dimension it outside of the macros in our module, so it's going to remain fixed regardless of the macro that we run in this module. So all we need to do is first assign the remove filter number and then just run our macro remove filter, and I'm going to go over that next. That is our remove filter macro. So the important thing is when we click this particular macro, this number gets assigned, and then we run the same macro for all 12 of them. And so what is that remove filter? Let's take a look at that. This is the macro here, remove filter. Now basically here's what I want to do, and then I'll walk you through it. What I want to do is I want to say, okay, we're going to remove this. We know this is module macro number 1, remove filter number 1. So I know this is shape number 1, right? Because we know it. We set this to number 1. Remove filter number 4, 3, 2. So we set this particular item. So we need to know this variable here is very important that we determine which one it is, which shape, which close button it pertains to, because I need the text. So once we know that, so once I know this is number 1, this is number 2, 3, or 4, then what I want to do is I want to pull the text. I want to extract this text from the shape. So I know the text, so I know the shape, I know it's shape, filter shape number 1. So what is the text of that? Then once I have the text, I want to look in a specific range. I want to look in this range, and I've determined that this range is called the criteria range. I've named this range criteria range. So what I want to do is I want to search for that specific text. In this case, it would be column 27, 5. It'll be found there. I want to search for women's in this range. Once it's found, I want to remove it. So I want to remove it. Once it's found, I want to delete it. Right? And then that's the first step. Once it's deleted, I want to take whatever's here and I want to bring it up here, and I want to clear this out. So I want to take whatever values are down here and I want to move them up one side. So that's how we're going to do that. So when we add filters, okay, so let's go ahead and add some more filters in here, and let's add some styles in here and sweatshirts, okay, and some colors, red and white. Okay, so now we've got multiple filters here. So basically, if I remove one, I want to take these two and I want to bring them up. So what I remove men's, I want to take women's, kids, and move them up. Let me show you what that looks like. Removing men's is going to take those two values, women and kids, and remove men and bring them up. That's what I want to do, but I want to do that within the code. Then we're going to then all we need to do is rerun our filter macro based on those. So let's go ahead and go over that. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to remove the filter number. If it's 0, we need to, just in case it's 0, if it's not existing, we need to exit the sub. This is critical. We need a value here. And of course, that value is assigned down here by clicking the close buttons. So we have the value, and we're going to set the criteria text. That's going to be the text that we're going to remove as a string, the criteria range as a range, and the found criteria range. Remember, we're going to set both of those as ranges. Here is our criteria right here. Here's our criteria range. It's already a named range called criteria range. And we want to set another range to the found so we can find the text inside this range. Whatever the text is, I need to find it in that range. Once it's found, I need to get the column, and I need to get the row, and I need to remove it, and I need to bring the one up. So that's what we're going to do in the VBA. So the criteria, so we've set these found row, found column as long, last criteria row is long. So the criteria text, what is the text? That is the filter. Remember, we've set the number, we've set the shape number. We know what number we've clicked on. The filter shape, remember, we're going to extract the text. I'm going to extract it. That now I know. Now I've set it in the variable. The criteria text is right here. So in this case, if I click on this, the criteria text is polo. If I click on this close, the criteria text is women. So we've got to pull that text out of it. All right, moving along, we're going to set the criteria range as the dot range. We've already defined sheet 1 here. I'm going to set the criteria range. I just showed you. That's the full criteria. That's that full range. It's already been predefined in our table. In this case, we could use the table. We could use AA5 all the way through AC11, or we could just use the named range, in this case criteria range. So we're using the named range. It's easier to see. Next up, we're going to set the found criteria range. We need to find that name. What are we finding? We're finding criteria text. Where are we looking? We're looking in the criteria range. Criteria range. Actually, this can be, we've already set this, so this could be actually criteria range. So it's the same thing. We don't need to define that. We've already defined it up here. So we're going to find it in the criteria text. We're going to look for the text. And where are we going to find it? We're going to look in values and whole. So if it's found, then we need to do something. If not is nothing. That means if it's found. These negatives cancel each other out. It means if it's found. Now, once it's found, we're going to continue on with these lines of codes right here. We need to get the found column, which is going to be the found criteria range in the column, and the found row is the found criteria. So this is going to get us our column and our row. Now what we can do is we can clear the contents out of just that cell. The cells of sheet 1, found row, found column, clear the contents, remove that criteria. We don't need that criteria. The user has to delete that criteria so we can clear it out. Now all we need to do is move the rows up. The first thing I need to do is determine the last row. If I'm going to be moving, let's add one more here to that. We've got women's and kids already, and let's add babies to this. So if I'm going to be removing women's, I need to determine the last row of this column and take the next row and the last row and bring them up here to here, and then I need to delete whatever's here. So basically what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be copying this, I'm going to be pasting it here, and then I'm going to be removing this. So that's basically what I want to do inside the code. So we can do that here. The last criteria row, we know is the last possible row is 12 in this case. The found column is the column. In this case, it's 27. So this is going to get us our last row of the criteria, the last row, last criteria row. And then, of course, if the last criteria row is greater than the found row, why is this? Well, we don't need to do anything. If the user has removed babies, if it's already the last row, we don't need to move anything up. So if they're removing babies, that's already the last row, so we don't need to do anything. But if in the case our last criteria row is greater than the found row, then we do need to move things up. So we can do that with just this line of code. The range, right, we're using a range. The cells, the found cells, this is where we're going to be placing it to. We're going to be starting at the row and starting at the column. That's our starting point, and we're going to use our last row minus 1. Our last row minus 1 is equal to our found row plus 1, our found column. So basically what that is going to say, okay, our found row, let's say we removed women's. Our found row, our found column is right here. This plus the last row minus 1, this equals this. So all we're doing is saying, we're saying women's and kids, this cells AA5 through AA6 is equal to AA7 through AA6 through AA7. So basically all we're going to be doing is taking this and moving it up here, just as I showed you. So that line of code does just that. All right, and then what we're going to do is we're just going to clear the last value. We've replaced it, so we're going to take the last criteria row, the found column, we're going to clear the last value out. Again, all we're doing is if we've deleted women's, we're going to delete it, clear that out, take these values, copy them here, paste them here, and then taking the last value and deleting it. So that is exactly what we do, but through the code. So again, let's run that code and remove women's. So we click women's, remove it, it runs the macro, and it does just that. Now we're ready. Now all we need to do is rerun our filter macro. So now we're ready. Now we need to rebuild the filter shapes. I show you how we do that. We rebuild it because we need to rebuild them because it's based on the new criteria. It's not based on the 7, it's now based on these 6. So we need to remove all this and then just create those 6 filters here. Re-add the 6 ones, clear them all out and re-add them, and once we're done, then we need to run the filter macro. We just went through the filter macro, and all we need to do is refilter the list. That is how we do it. That is exactly how it's done. So this is an amazing training where we've given you the ability using advanced filters to have a single click filter to remove or add filters very, very easily. And I showed you just with some really good shape management and some proper positioning, and we have the ability to clear the filters out, which I went through also on you. So this is a great training. I'm really glad I got to show this to you. We've covered an hour on this training, which is about normal for us. So thank you so much for joining us. Of course, if you'd like to support us, please check out the dashboard course. That helps keep these trainings for free. So thank you very much. Make sure you comment and like and share the videos. I appreciate it. Have a great day.